The streets of Baltimore buzzed with life on a humid summer evening. Cars honked impatiently as pedestrians weaved through the intersections, their faces illuminated by the neon glow of storefront signs. Jamal Carter, a 23-year-old college graduate with dreams of becoming a lawyer, was walking home after his evening shift at a local bookstore. Dressed in a crisp white shirt and black slacks, Jamal cut a professional figure, yet he always felt the weight of judgment from strangers' eyes. As he neared the corner of Lexington Avenue, a black SUV with tinted windows slowed to a crawl beside him. Jamal glanced at it briefly, his instincts on high alert. He had learned from experience that vehicles like this one often meant trouble. The window rolled down, revealing a woman in her early 40s. Her blonde hair was tied into a tight bun, and her sharp blue eyes locked onto him. She wore a tailored black suit that screamed authority, and the badge clipped to her belt confirmed her position: FBI. "Jamal Carter," she called out, her voice cold and commanding. "Yes." Jamal replied cautiously, taking a step back. "Agent Denise Harper, FBI. "We need to talk," she said, stepping out of the vehicle. Her heels clicked against the pavement as she approached him, exuding an aura of dominance. "About what?" Jamal asked, his heart pounding. "Step over here," she ordered, gesturing toward the sidewalk. Jamal hesitated, unsure of what he could have possibly done to attract federal attention. Still, he complied, unwilling to escalate the situation. "I'm not sure what this is about, but I haven't done anything wrong," Jamal said, his voice steady but tinged with unease. Agent Harper smirked, a condescending edge to her expression. "You know, you people always say that," she remarked, her tone laced with prejudice. Jamal's stomach churned. "Excuse me," he asked, incredulous. "Don't play dumb, Mr. Carter," she snapped. "You match the description of someone involved in a recent cybercrime investigation. Care to explain?" "Cybercrime?" Jamal repeated, stunned. "I don't even own a computer right now. I've been working double shifts at the bookstore for months just to make rent." Harper's eyes narrowed as she pulled out a small notepad. "Convenient story," she said, jotting something down. "But I don't buy it." "You're coming with me." "What? On what grounds?" Jamal demanded, his voice rising. "Obstruction," she replied flatly, snapping her notepad shut. Before Jamal could protest, Harper grabbed his arm with a grip that was anything but professional. The sudden force made him stumble, drawing the attention of nearby pedestrians. "Hey, what are you doing?" a bystander shouted. "He didn't do anything," another chimed in. Harper ignored them, dragging Jamal toward the SUV. "Get in," she ordered, shoving him into the back seat. Jamal's mind raced as the door slammed shut. This couldn't be happening. He was innocent, yet here he was, being treated like a criminal. Harper climbed into the driver's seat and sped off, her expression unreadable. As the vehicle weaved through the city streets, Jamal tried to steady his breathing. "You can't just detain me without cause," he said, his voice firm despite his fear. Harper glanced at him through the rearview mirror, her lips curling into a smirk. "Watch me." The SUV pulled into an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of town. The place was dimly lit, with shadows dancing across the walls. Harper yanked Jamal out of the car and marched him inside, her grip unyielding. "What is this?" Jamal demanded, his voice echoing in the cavernous space. Harper didn't answer. Instead, she shoved him into a metal chair and pulled out a folder from her bag. She slapped it onto a nearby table, the sound reverberating through the room. "You've got a lot of explaining to do," she said, her tone dripping with disdain. "I've already told you I didn't do anything," Jamal replied, his frustration mounting. Harper leaned in close, her icy gaze piercing. "Do you think I care what you have to say? People like you are always up to something. It's my job to stop you before you cause more damage. Jamal clenched his fists, anger bubbling beneath the surface. People like me? What's that supposed to mean? You know exactly what I mean, Harper shot back, her voice low and menacing. The tension in the room was suffocating. Jamal's pulse quickened as Harper began pacing, her heels clicking ominously against the concrete floor. I've spent years dealing with criminals who think they're untouchable, she said, her voice carrying an edge of arrogance. And trust me, I always find a way to make them crack. Well, you've got the wrong guy, Jamal retorted, his voice steady despite the turmoil inside him. Harper stopped pacing and fixed him with a cold stare. We'll see about that, she said, pulling out her phone. As she made a call, Jamal scanned the room, searching for a way out. But the warehouse was locked up tight, and Harper's presence was as oppressive as the walls surrounding him. Looks like we're going to be here for a while, Harper said after ending the call. Hope you're comfortable. Jamal didn't respond. Instead, he stared at her, his mind racing with thoughts of how to handle the situation. He knew he couldn't afford to lose his composure. Harper was clearly looking for any excuse to escalate the encounter, and Jamal refused to give her the satisfaction. The air in the warehouse was thick with tension as Jamal sat shackled to the metal chair, his wrists raw from the tight cuffs. Agent Harper stood across from him, her arms folded, a smirk playing on her lips. Her posture exuded control, but there was a gleam in her eye that suggested she enjoyed the power imbalance. Let's cut to the chase, Harper began, dropping the folder on the table between them. The papers inside spilled out printouts of bank transactions, grainy surveillance photos, and other documents Jamal couldn't immediately decipher. Explain this, she said, tapping a photo of a hooded figure entering a bank. Jamal squinted at the image, confusion etched on his face. That's not me, he said flatly. Harper chuckled, a dry, humorless sound. It's funny how often I hear that. She leaned closer, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. Here's the thing, Jamal. I don't need you to admit to anything. I just need you to know that I'm going to bury you in evidence until you have no choice but to cooperate. Jamal's jaw tightened. I have nothing to cooperate on. I don't know anything about this. Oh, come on, Harper scoffed. You think I'm stupid? You've been siphoning money from bank accounts for months. We've traced the IP addresses back to a location tied to your name. That's impossible, Jamal said, his voice rising. I've been working non-stop. I don't even have time to. Enough. Harper snapped, slamming her fist on the table. Her sudden outburst echoed through the empty warehouse, making Jamal flinch. She straightened her blazer and adjusted her tone, though the edge in her voice remained. You're not fooling me, Carter. Your little act might work on some rookie, but I've been in this game too long to fall for it. Jamal stared at her, anger simmering just beneath the surface. This isn't about evidence, is it? You've already made up your mind about me. You saw my face, my skin, and decided I'm guilty. Harper's eyes narrowed, her smirk fading. For a moment, her expression betrayed something, a flicker of defensiveness, perhaps, but it was gone as quickly as it appeared. I suggest you watch your tone, she said coldly. You're in enough trouble as it is. Jamal leaned forward, his voice steady despite his anger. You're not after the truth. You're after someone to blame, and I'm convenient. But I won't let you intimidate me. The two locked eyes, the silence between them crackling with unspoken tension. Harper broke it first, pacing the room again, her heels clicking against the floor. You think you're some kind of hero, she said, her tone mocking. Standing up to the big, bad FBI agent? Let me tell you something, kid. The world doesn't care about your little sob story. It's people like me who keep society running. By targeting innocent people. Jamal shot back. Harper froze mid-step, turning to glare at him. "You don't know the first thing about what it takes to do my job," she hissed. "I've seen things that would make you crumble. I don't have time for your self-righteous lectures." "Then maybe you shouldn't be in this job," Jamal retorted, his voice cutting through the space like a blade. The words hung in the air, heavy and unyielding. Harper's face darkened, and for a moment, Jamal thought she might lose her temper entirely. But instead, she took a deep breath and sat down across from him, her demeanor eerily calm. "Let me spell this out for you," she said, her voice low and menacing. "You have two options: you cooperate, or you make this harder on yourself. Either way, I win." Jamal held her gaze, refusing to look away. "You're wrong. This isn't about winning or losing. It's about justice, and what you're doing isn't justice." Harper's lips curled into a sneer. "Save the speeches for someone who cares." Suddenly, the sound of footsteps echoed from the far end of the warehouse. Harper stiffened, her hand instinctively moving toward her holstered weapon. A tall man in a dark suit emerged from the shadows, his expression serious. "Agent Harper," he said, his voice firm. "What's going on here?" Harper rose to her feet, her posture defensive. "Agent Daniels, I'm interrogating a suspect linked to the cybercrime case." Daniels glanced at Jamal, his eyes narrowing. "Suspect? Harper, this doesn't look like standard procedure." "I have evidence tying him to the crimes," Harper insisted, her tone defensive. "Evidence or assumptions?" Daniels countered, his voice sharp. Jamal's heart raced as he watched the exchange. For the first time since the ordeal began, he felt a glimmer of hope. Daniels stepped closer, his gaze shifting to Jamal. "Mr. Carter, do you have legal representation?" Jamal hesitated, unsure if this was a trap. "No," he admitted. "Then we're done here," Daniels said, turning to Harper. "Release him." "What? You can't be serious!" Harper exclaimed, her face flushed with anger. "I said release him," Daniels repeated, his tone leaving no room for argument. Harper's jaw tightened, but she pulled out the key to Jamal's cuffs. Her movements were stiff and jerky as she unlocked them, the metal clinking loudly in the silent room. Jamal rubbed his wrists, relief washing over him. "Thank you," he said to Daniels. "This isn't over," Harper muttered, glaring at him. Daniels turned to her, his expression stern. "Agent Harper, a word." As the two stepped aside, Jamal seized the opportunity to leave. His legs felt shaky, but he forced himself to walk steadily out of the warehouse and into the cool night air. Jamal hurried down the dimly lit street, his mind racing. His hands still tingled from the tight cuffs, a stark reminder of how close he had come to losing everything. The night air was cool against his skin, but it did little to calm the fire burning within him. Agent Harper's words replayed in his mind, each one cutting deeper than the last. "People like you." The phrase rang in his ears like a bell, each chime a painful reminder of the systemic bias he had faced. Jamal shook his head, trying to focus on the present. He needed to get home, to think, to figure out his next move. He barely made it 2 blocks before a sleek black sedan pulled up beside him. For a moment, panic seized him, but the passenger window rolled down to reveal Agent Daniels. "Jamal," Daniels called out, his tone measured. Jamal froze, his instincts screaming at him to run. "What do you want now?" he asked, his voice edged with exhaustion. "Get in," Daniels said. "We need to talk." Jamal hesitated, his gaze flicking between Daniels and the empty street. "Why should I trust you?" Daniels sighed, his expression softening. "Because I'm not Harper, and I'm not here to hurt you. I'm here to help." The sincerity in Daniels' voice gave Jamal pause. Reluctantly, he opened the car door and slid into the passenger seat. The door shut with a quiet thud, and Daniels drove off, the hum of the engine the only sound between them. After a few moments, Daniels broke the silence. "I owe you an apology," he began, keeping his eyes on the road. Jamal scoffed. "An apology? For what?" "Letting your partner treat me like a criminal." Daniels nodded, his jaw tightening. "You're right. What happened back there was unacceptable. Harper's methods, they crossed the line, and this isn't the first time." Jamal turned to him, skepticism etched on his face. "So why do you let her get away with it?" Daniels exhaled heavily, as if the weight of his response pressed on his chest. "It's complicated. The Bureau has a culture of loyalty, and calling out a fellow agent doesn't come without consequences. But what she did tonight, what she's been doing, it's wrong." Jamal crossed his arms, his anger bubbling to the surface. "And what am I supposed to do with that? Your apology doesn't change what happened." Daniels pulled into a quiet parking lot and turned off the engine. He faced Jamal, his expression earnest. "You're right again. But I want to make it right." Jamal frowned. "How?" Daniels reached into his jacket and pulled out a business card. "This is a lawyer who specializes in cases like yours. Civil rights, abuses of power. He's the best in the field." Jamal took the card hesitantly, reading the name etched in bold letters. "Why are you doing this?" "Because Harper's behavior won't change unless someone holds her accountable," Daniels said firmly. "And because it's the right thing to do." Jamal studied the card, his emotions swirling. Anger, relief, suspicion, they all vied for dominance. Finally, he tucked the card into his pocket. "I'll think about it," he said quietly. Daniels nodded, seeming to understand the weight of Jamal's decision. "That's all I ask." As Daniels drove him home, Jamal's mind raced. Could he really go up against the FBI? The thought was daunting, but so was the idea of staying silent. The next morning, Jamal sat at his kitchen table, the lawyer's card resting in front of him. His best friend, Malik, sat across from him, listening intently as Jamal recounted the events of the previous night. "That's insane, man," Malik said, shaking his head. "She really said people like you." "Yeah," Jamal replied, his voice tinged with frustration. "It wasn't just what she said, it was how she said it. Like she enjoyed tearing me down." Malik leaned back in his chair, his expression serious. "You can't let her get away with this, Jay. If you don't speak up, she'll just do it to someone else." Jamal sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I know. But taking on the FBI? That's a fight I'm not sure I'm ready for." "Ready or not, you've got to do something," Malik said. "You've got the truth on your side." Jamal stared at the card, the lawyer's name seeming to taunt him. He knew Malik was right, but the fear of retaliation loomed large. After a long moment, Jamal picked up his phone and dialed the number. "Law offices of Thomas Whitaker," a voice answered. Jamal hesitated, then took a deep breath. "Hi, my name is Jamal Carter. I think I need your help." Later that afternoon, Jamal sat in the sleek office of Thomas Whitaker, a seasoned civil rights attorney with a reputation for taking on powerful adversaries. Whitaker was a tall, imposing man with a calm demeanor that immediately put Jamal at ease. "Tell me everything," Whitaker said, his pen poised over a notepad. Jamal recounted the events of the previous night in painstaking detail, leaving nothing out. Whitaker listened intently, nodding occasionally as he took notes. When Jamal finished, Whitaker leaned back in his chair, his expression thoughtful. "This isn't just about you, Jamal," he said. "This is about a pattern of behavior, one that needs to be exposed." Jamal nodded, feeling a surge of determination. "What do we do next?" Whitaker smiled faintly. "We fight. But first, we need evidence." Meanwhile, in a sterile FBI conference room, Harper sat across from Daniels, her arms crossed defensively. "You undermined me," she snapped, glaring at him. "I stopped you from making a mistake," Daniels replied evenly. "Don't give me that sanctimonious garbage," Harper shot back. "You embarrassed me in front of a suspect and a bunch of civilians." Daniels leaned forward, his voice cold. "You embarrassed yourself, Denise. And if you keep crossing the line, you're going to find yourself on the wrong side of an investigation." Harper's eyes narrowed. "Is that a threat?" "It's a fact," Daniels said, rising from his seat. "You've been warned." As he walked out, Harper clenched her fists, her mind racing. She wasn't about to let this go without a fight. The buzzing of Jamal's phone jolted him awake. He reached for it groggily, his heart skipping a beat when he saw the name on the screen, Thomas Whitaker. Sitting up in bed, he quickly answered. "Hello." "Jamal," Whitaker's voice was firm but tinged with urgency. "We've got a lead. You need to come to my office as soon as possible." "What kind of lead?" Jamal asked, adrenaline already coursing through him. "The kind that could blow this case wide open," Whitaker replied. "Just get here." An hour later, Jamal was seated in Whitaker's office once again, this time alongside Malik, who had insisted on coming for moral support. Whitaker spread a series of documents across his desk, each one stamped with the FBI logo. "Where did you get these?" Jamal asked, his eyes scanning the papers. "Let's just say I have friends in the right places," Whitaker replied cryptically. "These documents show a pattern of misconduct from Agent Harper. Unlawful detentions, fabricated evidence, excessive force, it's all here." Jamal's jaw tightened as he read through the files. "She's been doing this for years." "Years," Whitaker confirmed. "And she's been protected by the system. Her superiors either turned a blind eye or actively covered for her. But this time, she made a mistake. She targeted the wrong person. Now we just have to prove it," Malik said, his voice steady. Whitaker nodded. "Exactly. And for that, we need to go public. If we file a lawsuit and share these findings with the press, we can create enough pressure to force an internal investigation." Jamal hesitated. "What if they come after me? Retaliate?" "They might try," Whitaker admitted. "But with the right legal and public support, they won't get far. You have a voice, Jamal, and now is the time to use it." Jamal looked at Malik, who gave him an encouraging nod. Taking a deep breath, Jamal turned back to Whitaker. "Let's do it." Across town, Agent Harper sat in her sparsely decorated apartment, scrolling through her phone with a glass of wine in hand. The news alert that popped up made her freeze. "Breaking: FBI agent accused of misconduct in civil rights case." Her heart sank as she clicked on the link. The article detailed Jamal's allegations against her, complete with excerpts from the leaked documents. Her face grew hot with anger as she read Whitaker's statement. "Agent Harper's actions are not just a betrayal of her badge but a violation of the very principles of justice. We will not rest until she is held accountable." Harper slammed her glass down on the table, spilling wine onto the carpet. Grabbing her phone, she dialed a number. "Director Hammond," she said when the call connected. "We have a problem." "Denise, I've seen the news," Hammond replied, his voice cold. "And frankly, I warned you this would happen." "What are you talking about?" Harper snapped. "You've pushed the limits too many times," Hammond said. "Now it's coming back to haunt you. The Bureau can't afford this kind of scandal. You're on your own." The line went dead, leaving Harper seething. The days that followed were a whirlwind of media attention and legal maneuvering. Whitaker organized press conferences, where Jamal bravely recounted his ordeal. The public response was overwhelming, with protests erupting across the city demanding accountability from the FBI. Meanwhile, Harper found herself isolated. Colleagues avoided her in the hallways, and her superiors refused to take her calls. She spent sleepless nights poring over her own files, searching for anything she could use to discredit Jamal. But the walls were closing in. In a dimly lit diner, Harper met with a man in a dark suit, a private investigator she had hired in a desperate bid to save her career. "What do you have?" she asked, her voice low. "Not much," the investigator admitted. "Carter's record is clean. No criminal history, no connections to anything shady." Harper's frustration boiled over. "There has to be something. Keep digging." The man nodded reluctantly, but his expression betrayed doubt. As Harper watched him leave, a sinking feeling settled in her chest. At Whitaker's office, the mood was cautiously optimistic. The lawsuit had been filed, and the media attention was putting immense pressure on the FBI to act. "We're getting somewhere," Whitaker said, showing Jamal and Malik the latest headlines. Jamal smiled faintly, but his relief was tempered by the weight of it all. "Do you really think they'll hold her accountable?" "They don't have a choice," Whitaker said. "The evidence is damning, and public opinion is on our side." But Harper wasn't done. In a last-ditch effort, she showed up at Jamal's apartment unannounced, her face a mask of forced calm. "We need to talk," she said when Jamal opened the door. He stared at her in disbelief. "What are you doing here?" "I want to make things right," she said, stepping closer. "Off the record." Jamal crossed his arms, his expression wary. "Why should I believe anything you say?" Harper's mask slipped for a moment, revealing desperation. "Because I'm willing to help you, if you help me." Jamal shook his head. "This isn't about deals. This is about justice." Before Harper could respond, Malik appeared in the doorway behind Jamal. "You should leave," he said firmly. Harper hesitated, then turned and walked away, her heels clicking against the pavement. The next morning, the headlines were even more damning. FBI opens internal investigation into Agent Harper's conduct. Harper read the news from her desk, her hands trembling. Her career, her reputation, everything she had worked for was crumbling. But for Jamal, the tide was turning. The world was finally listening to his story, and the fight for justice was gaining momentum. The courtroom was silent, save for the occasional rustle of papers or the quiet murmur of whispered conversations. Jamal sat at the plaintiff's table, flanked by Thomas Whitaker and his team. Across the room, Agent Harper sat rigidly beside her attorney, her face an unreadable mask. The weight of the moment pressed down on everyone present, as though they all sensed the gravity of what was about to unfold. The judge entered, and everyone rose. "Be seated," he instructed, his voice carrying authority. As the proceedings began, Whitaker wasted no time presenting the evidence he and Jamal had painstakingly gathered over the past weeks. "This case isn't just about one man's experience," Whitaker said, addressing the jury. "It's about a pattern of abuse, a misuse of power that has gone unchecked for far too long." He gestured to a screen, where damning internal FBI reports were displayed. "These documents show a clear history of Agent Harper's misconduct, including multiple complaints that were conveniently swept under the rug. But tonight, we say enough." Jamal watched as the jury's expressions shifted, a mixture of outrage and disbelief crossing their faces. For the first time since this ordeal began, he felt a glimmer of hope. The trial stretched over several days, each one more emotionally draining than the last. Jamal testified with quiet dignity, recounting the night of his arrest in vivid detail. Harper's attorney tried to rattle him, but Jamal stood firm, his voice steady as he spoke his truth. On the second day, Daniels took the stand. His testimony was a turning point. "I joined the FBI to serve justice," Daniels said, his voice steady. "But what I witnessed that night was anything but just. Agent Harper's actions were fueled by bias, not evidence, and they undermined the integrity of our batch." Harper glared at Daniels from across the courtroom, her jaw tight. But Daniels didn't waver, even as her attorney attempted to discredit him. Outside the courthouse, the streets buzzed with activity. Protesters held signs demanding accountability, their chants echoing through the city. Media crews captured every moment, ensuring the world was watching. Jamal and Malik stood on the courthouse steps during a break, taking in the scene. "Look at this," Malik said, gesturing to the crowd. "You started something bigger than yourself, Jay." Jamal nodded, though the weight of responsibility still pressed heavily on him. "It's not over yet." As the trial reached its final day, Harper herself took the stand. Her lawyer painted her as a dedicated agent who had been unfairly targeted, but under cross-examination, Whitaker dismantled her facade. "Agent Harper," he said, his tone sharp, "how do you explain the discrepancies in your reports? The omissions? The complaints filed against you?" Harper shifted uncomfortably. "I've always done my job to the best of my ability. Even when that meant fabricating evidence." Whitaker pressed. Her silence was damning. The jury deliberated for hours, the tension in the courtroom palpable as everyone awaited the verdict. When they finally returned, Jamal's heart pounded in his chest. "Have you reached a verdict?" the judge asked. "We have, Your Honor," the foreperson replied. The verdict was read aloud, each word reverberating through the room. "In the matter of Carter v. Harper, we find the defendant, Agent Denise Harper, guilty of misconduct and violation of civil rights." A collective exhale swept through the room. Jamal felt tears welling up in his eyes as Malik clapped a supportive hand on his shoulder. Whitaker leaned over, his expression one of quiet triumph. "We did it," he said. The fallout was swift. Harper was immediately suspended from the FBI, pending further disciplinary action. The Bureau, under immense public pressure, announced sweeping reforms to address systemic bias and hold agents accountable. Jamal, meanwhile, became a symbol of resilience and courage. His story inspired others to come forward, creating a ripple effect that challenged the status quo within law enforcement agencies nationwide. One evening, as Jamal sat on his porch with Malik, watching the sun dip below the horizon, he allowed himself a rare moment of peace. "You changed the game, man," Malik said, breaking the silence. Jamal smiled faintly. "I just did what needed to be done." As the stars began to dot the sky, Jamal felt a sense of closure not just for himself, but for everyone who had been silenced by fear. This wasn't the end of the fight for justice, but it was a victory, a powerful reminder that even against the most formidable odds, the truth could prevail. If you like this story, share your thoughts and observations in the comment section below, and make sure to like and subscribe, for the next interesting and entertaining story ever.